The dust hung in the late afternoon light like a thin veil, drifting slowly between them as the rancher tried to steady his breath. Moments ago, he had ridden straight into the chaos without thinking. Two armed men cornering the young Apache woman near the dry creek bed. He had fired a warning shot, stepped between them, and scattered the danger. But now, as she clutched his arm with trembling fingers, her voice quivered with accusation rather than gratitude. The desperation in her eyes unsettled him. He had expected fear, maybe relief, but not this sharp, demanding plea echoing in the open air. She looked up at him, her face streaked with dust and emotion, her chest rising and falling rapidly as though every second mattered. "You saw everything," she repeated, voice cracking. "Take responsibility." The words didn't match the situation as he understood it. He had only stopped a fight, nothing more. Around them, the wind crawled across the plains, rustling the dry brush while the rancher tried to understand what she really meant. Her grip on his shirt tightened as though letting go would seal a fate she couldn't afford. Her fear felt older, heavier, rooted in something he couldn't yet see. The rancher opened his mouth to explain, to remind her he was only passing through and had no connection to any of this, but the sound of hooves silenced him. Several riders approached from the ridge, their silhouettes outlined by the sinking sun. The girl turned toward them, her jaw tightening with dread. The men slowed their horses and dismounted as though they already knew the outcome. Their gazes shifted from her to him, cold and measuring. The rancher's heart sank. Whatever conflict he had stumbled into, it wasn't simple. He could feel it in the way the riders watched. Waiting for him to claim or deny something he didn't yet understand, she stepped closer to him, her shoulder brushing his arm as if drawing a line of protection with her body. "They'll take me back," she whispered, barely audible but cutting through him like a blade. "And they won't listen. They'll blame me for running. They'll call me dishonored." The rancher blinked, piecing together fragments of a world he had never lived in. Her tribe's rules, their traditions, none of it was familiar to him. He had no intention of interfering in anyone's customs, yet he also couldn't ignore the fear in her voice. It was raw, trembling, the kind that came from knowing what awaited if she returned unwillingly. One of the riders stepped forward, a tall man with braided hair and a stern expression carved deep into his features. He spoke in a calm voice that carried weight. "She left without permission," he said. "She is to be returned." His gaze lingered on the rancher, suspicious yet patient. "You interfered. That makes you part of this now." The rancher felt heat creeping up his neck. He hadn't interfered for personal reasons only because she had been outnumbered, but explaining that seemed pointless. The riders' hardened faces suggested they had already drawn conclusions. He had no power to erase. The young woman turned sharply toward the man. "You know why I ran?" she said, her voice steadier now, though pain still tinged each word. "You know I was promised to someone I did not choose." She swallowed hard and looked away. "A man twice my age, one who sees me as land to be claimed." Her voice trembled despite her attempt to sound brave. The rancher felt something shift inside him. In that moment, she wasn't accusing him, she was pleading with fate, fighting against a destiny dictated by rules she had never agreed to. He took a slow breath, weighing the danger of speaking. The riders had numbers, weapons, and the authority of tradition. He was just a rancher on his way to town, a man with a horse, a tired back, and no intention of making enemies. "I only helped her," he said finally, keeping his voice calm. Nothing more. The riders exchanged glances that said they heard his words but didn't accept them. The rancher realized then that neutrality was no longer an option. His involvement had already been interpreted as a claim. Whether he meant it or not, the girl looked at him again, her eyes wide with desperation, shimmering beneath the fading sunlight. "If you don't stand with me now," she whispered, "they will take me back tonight. And what happens after? I won't survive it." Her voice broke at the end, the words carrying a truth she had lived with far longer than he had known her. Something inside the rancher stirred, an old instinct he used to follow before life's burdens had worn him down. The instinct to protect the vulnerable, even when the cost was high. But this choice wasn't simple. Whatever he decided would follow both of them far beyond this moment. The riders encircled them slowly, forming a loose ring of silent judgment. The rancher could feel the weight of their expectations pressing against his ribs. He looked at the girl truly looked and saw a young woman fighting for her life, her freedom, her future. She wasn't asking him to marry her or claim her or change her destiny forever. She was asking him not to abandon her at the very moment everyone else would decide her fate. The responsibility wasn't a burden she wanted to place on him. It was the only rope she had left to hold on to. The rancher exhaled deeply, feeling the crossroads settle over him like a storm cloud. He wasn't a hero, wasn't a man who sought out battles or glory. He just did what felt right in the moment. And right now, walking away meant pushing her into a darkness she feared more than death. So he stepped forward, not boldly, not dramatically, but with quiet resolve, and positioned himself between her and the men who wanted to take her. The rider stiffened, surprised, but he didn't look away. "If she wants to stay free," he said, voice low but firm, "then she stays." The wind fell silent. The plains held their breath. And in that charged stillness, the rancher realized there was no turning back. The circle of riders closed in slowly, their horses snorting clouds into the cooling air. The rancher felt the weight of a dozen hard stares pressing on him, each one demanding a decision he had no time to prepare for. The young Apache woman stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong enough to reach all who watched. "In our law," she said, pointing at him with a shaking hand, "a man who protects a woman becomes answerable for her safety." The rancher swallowed, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in his chest like a stone he didn't choose to carry. He raised his hands calmly, trying to diffuse the rising tension. "I only did what was right," he said, voice firm despite the unease twisting inside him. But the riders didn't react with gratitude, they reacted with expectation, almost relief, as if they had found someone to place the burden on. The young woman turned to him again, her eyes glistening, her breath uneven. "Then stand with me now," she whispered, "or they'll take me away forever." Those words echoed across the plains, sinking into the rancher's heart in a way he didn't expect. The rider who seemed to lead the group stepped closer. His expression was stern but not cruel, carved by years of tradition he believed in with every breath. "She must return," he said plainly. "She ran from a promise made by her family. This stranger," he nodded at the rancher, "has no place in our law unless he accepts it." The rancher felt the heat of the setting sun on his neck, the dry wind tugging at his coat. He wasn't meant to be part of any tribe's conflicts. He was a man who lived alone, worked alone, and answered only to himself, yet something in the girl's eyes held him rooted to the ground, unable to step aside. She wasn't asking for marriage or possession. She wasn't asking him to defy a whole tribe. She was asking him to keep her alive, to not allow her to be dragged back to a life where decisions were made for her, where her voice didn't matter. The rancher wasn't a man who chased after causes or fought for glory, but he had always despised injustice. That old instinct stirred again, quiet, steady, unyielding. He stepped just slightly in front of her, enough for the riders to notice, not enough to challenge them. "If she's afraid of what waits for her," he said, "you should listen to that." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm made the riders pay attention. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Her fear is not the question," he replied. "Our law stands. But if you claim her, if you take responsibility, we'll not force her away from you." The rancher's heart thudded painfully. Claim her? He hadn't claimed anything. But walking away meant destruction for the girl behind him. She touched his sleeve lightly, her fingers trembling from exhaustion and hope. "I don't want to belong to anyone," she said softly. "I just want a chance to choose my own life." Her words carved a deep ache into the rancher's chest. She wasn't asking him to take her forever, only to stand as a shield long enough for her to breathe freely. He met her eyes, searching for doubt, but all he found was a quiet, desperate courage. The kind he had seen only in people who had been pushed too far. The rancher turned again to the riders. "If she stays with me," he said, "I won't keep her prisoner. She's free to choose her path." The leader frowned. "A woman's freedom is not for you to define." But the rancher didn't back down. "And neither is her captivity," he replied. A tense silence followed, thick as the dust in the air. For a moment it seemed like violence might erupt. Hands hovered near weapons, horses shifted nervously, the planes held their breath. But then the leader looked at the girl, really looked, and something softened in his rigid expression. He exhaled slowly, lowering his hand from the reins. "If she chooses freedom," he said, "and you swear you will not abandon her tonight, we will not take her by force." A murmur rippled through the riders, some disapproving, others quietly relieved. The girl's shoulders sagged with a kind of disbelief, as though she hadn't expected mercy of any kind. She stepped out from behind the rancher, her chin lifting with newfound strength. "I choose my own path," she said. The leader nodded once, deeply, accepting her decision even if he didn't agree with it. The riders backed away slowly, mounting their horses with solemn expressions. The rancher let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The girl turned to him, exhaustion overtaking her now that the danger had passed. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He shook his head. "Maybe not. But I wasn't going to watch them take you somewhere you didn't want to go." She glanced down at the dusty earth, tears gathering again, not from fear this time, but from the strange relief of being seen. "Thank you," she whispered. Those two words carried more depth than 1,000 explanations. He nodded, unsure how to respond. They walked toward his horse together, the sky glowing orange and purple above them. The riders watched from the ridge before finally turning away, disappearing into the distance like ghosts fading into dusk. The rancher helped her into the saddle, then mounted behind her, not out of possession, but protection. "Where will we go?" she asked quietly. He thought for a moment. "Somewhere they can't force your choices," he said. The plain stretched before them, wide and wild, offering no promises but endless possibility. And for the first time in her life, that was more than enough. As the horse moved forward, the rancher felt the weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders, not heavy, not unwelcome, but real. He hadn't chosen this path, but he didn't regret it. The girl leaned slightly against him, steadying herself, trusting him in a way that felt fragile but genuine. Together, they rode into the fading light, two unlikely souls bound not by law or tradition, but by a simple truth. Sometimes fate chooses people for each other long before they choose themselves. And in that quiet, uncertain beginning, their story finally found its peace.